Is there a film or a piece of media that represents an aspect of your life that you actually might find a bit off-putting or maybe even borderline offensive, but you still like it? For example, I like John Redcorn from King of the Hill and Nightwolf from Mortal Kombat. Are they stereotypical and over the top? Yeah, sure. So let's analyze exactly why I would tolerate such representations in these media. There was a scholar back in the day named Stuart Hall, and he wrote about his idea of encoding and decoding. To put it simply, he asserted that when a text is formulated, for example, let's say a movie, the filmmakers/creators consciously and unconsciously embed or encode meaning into the film, instilling their values, ideologies, biases, etc. But also the themes of the story, certain character arcs, etc.
But this one sort of lent itself to another idea I had, which was to take mythic motifs, psychological motifs from a few thousand years ago, and see if they still worked, see if people still cared about the same issues, about their parents, friendship, society, all these sorts of things. And when the movie came out, you know, everybody said, oh, it's fantastic, you know, it's all about special effects, that's why everybody wants to see it. I said, that has nothing to do with it. It really does have to do with the story, the psychological underpinnings, and the fun characters.
Then, it's put out for the world for audiences to decode the film, meaning they'll derive a certain meaning of the film based on their own values, ideologies, etc., as well as their own media literacy. I'll explain this in a bit. According to Hall, there are 3 ways in which audiences decode a piece of media. A dominant reading is when the audience can pick up on encoded meanings from the creators and ultimately agree or consume it well enough to say they liked it. There is little miscommunication or misreading between the creators and the audience. An example of this would be Spider-Man: No Way Home. There's little contest to say that this was an awful film. For the most part, people enjoyed it. They had a dominant reading of the film. The oppositional is, well, opposed to the dominant view of the creators. This is when the audience will not like or even reject the film because of something in the coded meaning. For example, Jar Jar Binks. George Lucas thought Jar Jar would be a beloved comic relief character when in reality he was seen more as annoying and unnecessary by the audience.
Jar Jar is a key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
This is the middle ground reading. This is where the encoded meaning will be seen and understood by the audience well enough that they pick up and notice certain aspects of the film that they may not like or agree with, but still manage to negotiate and tolerate or even like the film. For example, someone can really like The Phantom Menace even with Jar Jar present in the film. They are negotiating their reading of the film. With that in mind, let me jump in and give my 2 cents on how this pertains to representation. So when it comes to representation, Stuart Hall's approach can explain a lot about how we consume media. Notice I was referring to how people would react to story elements for my examples. That's because a reading can have another layer of decoding ideological meanings in a film. Because decoding ideologies and values from a film often takes a little more work, depending on the person and how overt the film actually is. When it comes to racial, ethnic, and cultural representations, we are more open to decode things differently than before. And my assertion is that time and social progression, at least in the West, have been a prominent driving force of how we consume and decode media representations. For example, Russell Means famously said that the animated Pocahontas films was the first white-led film to admit that colonizers came to conquer land and pillage. I'll link a LA Times article below, it's actually pretty fascinating. He admitted that he had issues with the script and there were a lot of inaccuracies, but that was quote-unquote missing the point. According to him, he felt the fact that there was a native Disney princess was a big deal for the time. And that's the kicker, for the time. See, at least for Russell Means, he took on native roles because he felt any representation was better than what we got in the early days of film. For him, it was progress. He ultimately negotiated, and so do thousands of natives in North America. I know plenty of friends and family that grew up watching Pocahontas and still like it, even knowing its problematic production process and retelling of the past. Because when we were children, that film was the best we had for the time. Dances with Wolves came out, And that was the film a lot of natives were watching over and over again, even though it had a lot of white savior tropes and uses natives more as a backdrop for the most part. My mom told me in every house she went to on the res, that movie was playing on people's TVs. They even make fun of that fact in Smoke Signals.
I mean, how many times have you seen Dances with Wolves? 100, 200? Oh, jeez. You have seen it that many times, haven't you?
A lot of native elders enjoyed John Ford westerns and other older westerns that have native characters, even though they have racist tones against natives. Because for them, just seeing natives on screen in any context was enough. They negotiated. In this postmodern era, I think we are at a place now where native audiences and others have more freedom to be more open about the representations they dislike, love, and are so-so with. With the advent of representations like Reservation Dogs, Rutherford Falls, Smoke Signals, and other native indie films, we are seeing an era where native audiences can have more dominant readings of films about them. And with technology and media changing so fast these days, the one thing that's really going to help better native representation is media literacy. To put it simply, media literacy is being literate in how to decode any type of media, like any language that you need to be literate in. For example, when you show your parents a meme, it takes a little more to explain the meme to them because of the layered contexts of the meme. They aren't as literate in that type of media. I think being literate in media language is an important skill that minorities in Western countries need to develop. When we are able to break down or decode a meaning or something, we are better able to understand it and in turn make something better or make something more suited for us. That isn't to say that I think we should hate and disregard any and all media that isn't indigenous, but I think being literate in the media language will help us have better communication with each other, preserve aspects of our culture, and progress as a people.
I think it's great that we can talk about it now, but the fact that it exists, I think it's a dangerous depiction, especially of Native women. And a lot of our youth have had to experience difficult things, racist things, because of that imagery.
It further engraves those stereotypes that somehow Native women all dressed like that sexy, like way back then. And like my opinion of Pocahontas has evolved over time. I would say 6-year-old me would say strongly disagree, because I saw a Native woman and it was a happy, romanticized, story of Pocahontas. But as I've grown up, I've done more research on her story and what's happened to her.
So why does that matter? Well, in the context of Native representation, I think natives and non-natives alike can strive to be more media literate, and from that can be motivated to make more cool and unique things. That uniqueness of being our voice. Whether it be overtly about a social issue or subtly in a fantastical narrative, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Native people can start making quality pieces of media that have a deep impact on the Indigenous community. And that's it, really. So next time I want to talk about the idea of native coding, which I think you guys are going to really like. So that's it. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.